Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to MoDXtra Games and Collectibles. I'm Chris, this is my channel. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with me here today. And in today's video, I want to talk about the San Diego Comic-Con G.I. Joe Classified Series previews that flooded the social medias last week. Yes, that's right, boys and girls. I'm running late once again. I was on a little family vacation last week, and so wasn't able to record myself. I was away down on the lovely south coast of England. Can you not tell by my tan? But in any case, yes, there were some digital renders that hit the socials. They were put out by the Full Force Podcast, Adventures in Podcasting, Secret Galaxy, I think, Big Bad Toy Store, and then later, maybe a day or two later, Entertainment Earth. So there were 5 digital renders in total, all previewed with a little bit of text in there saying, you know, join us at San Diego Comic-Con to hear more kind of thing. And as usual, I like to take a look at the digital renders, kind of share some thoughts and commentary, capture your thoughts as well in the comments down below. So let's take a look at these together and let's talk about these digital renders and the stuff that's coming up at San Diego Comic-Con. And getting us started in no particular order, we have this thing here. This is the Grim Viper. The Grim Viper? A new character of G.I. Joe Classified Series design, presumably. Well, I say new. It's a Frankenstein of a variety of kind of reuse pieces here. I don't really know what to make of this one, to be honest. I'm a bit unsure where to put my head in on this one. The head is obviously the Range Viper head, and I've got to admit that kind of bone-coloured skull piece with the yellow glowing eyes does look really cool, does look super fun, and has a lot of kind of kit bash potential, I suppose. But moving down into the body, it's the Saw Viper body. Then we've got some kind of vipery bits around the arms. Then pretty generic-y kind of combat pants, legs, and boots, which I'm sure one of you guys could probably pin down precisely which figures those have been used on, because you're always usually dead good at that. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I'm not quite sure where it is in my headspace. I mean, all the weaponry is complete reuse as well. Got this big old minigun, which we saw with one of the roadblocks originally, although they have added a few kind of decals in there to at least spice it up a little bit. This guy's struck up 18 kills with his minigun. You know, we've seen the pistol before, we've seen the knives and the machetes. I don't recognize this backpack. That's not the Range Viper's original backpack, because the Range Viper's original backpack had that little hook piece on the bottom for the grenade launcher. So again, someone let me know where that's from. I feel like I've seen it before, but I just can't put my finger on it. So it's an interesting one. It's a curious one in terms of an army builder. Like I said before, I think it's got a lot of kit bash potential. You could quite easily pop off that Range Viper reuse head and pop also, you know, whatever you like, all sorts of things on there, because once that skull head is taken off, it is a relatively generic sort of green camo coloured, you know, soldier type, toy soldier type, with a big flat vest. The only thing that would kind of break your kind of core military look there is this strange codpiece thing that they've got going on there. So I can see it having some potential for kit bashers and customizers. You know, so I think it's a nice figure to put out on that front. And I know a lot of people missed the Range Viper as well. It was very hard to get hold of. You know, I still hear reports and people still comment on my Range Viper review. Like even today on my Range Viper review, people comment saying, "Oh, I couldn't get hold of this one at all." So it was a bit of an alternative for your collection. It's, you know, you could do a lot worse. Like I say, that skull there, that bone-coloured skull mask is really eye-catching for sure. It's really eye-catching. I just don't know if I've got a place for it in my collection, to be honest. I just don't know. And at a time now, you know, where we're kind of into the summer and edging into the convention season, there's going to be a lot of stuff vying for my attention. You know, you just got to make budget decisions, haven't you? I'm not sure whether I'm going to go for this one. I don't know, but I can definitely see customizers and kit bashers out there going, "Oh, I could do some stuff with this, you know, I could do some stuff with this." So yeah, an interesting one, curious one, all told. And all the component parts I like, you know. I like all the bits from the various different figures. I'm just not sure I've got a place for it in my collection. I made my mind up. Yeah, let me know what you think. Try and convince me one way or the other, folks. Help me out, you know. But there you go, there's the Grim Viper. From one end of the scale to the other, because while the last one I'm like, I don't know if it's for me, I'm not sure, I'll probably skip this one. The Desert Scorpion, folks. Finally, I know a lot of people have been eagerly anticipating this figure's release, and I don't think it disappoints, at least, you know, as far as the digital render is concerned, to coin the phrase I've used many times before. If it comes to life, if the reality in 6-inch plastic form is like this, then I think there's going to be a lot of people pretty happy. I mean, clearly, the big kind of eye-catching piece of all this is the giant scorpion here. I mean, look at this. I mean, in my little script notes, I wrote big-ass scorpion. You know, you got the scorpion, and then the scorpion, or the scorpion, Scorp 10N, or whatever it is, it's got like a scorpion wrangling rod. They really do love their kind of creature companion stuff. They're like big old mutant fucking nasty scorpion thing, you know, a result of one of Mindbender's experiments or something. I know there's a lot of folks out there who were hoping for, and I'd probably put myself in that camp, we're kind of hoping for something a little bit more classified-ized, like a robotic scorpion, you know, something more in line with the 25th anniversary version of the Desert Scorpion. But still, I mean, come on. And if that's all articulated and stuff up there, up with the tail down to the stinger, and looks like it's got articulated claws and stuff, it's still going to be a pretty fun, freaky piece to play around with on your dios and take some photos of. So yeah, definitely a really interesting, eye-catching part of the set, all told there. But still, beyond that, lots to like. The figure itself, looking really cool. You know, I like the setup. It's obviously very heavily inspired by the vintage Desert Scorpion figure there, with the kind of brown mask and the well, what are those bits, those drape, like net protection drape things called? I feel like I knew that at one time in my life, and it's fallen out the filing cabinet in my head. But in any case, you know, got the red visor and the face mask and stuff, although they have done something pretty interesting, because you can see here, just off to the right-hand side, they've got like a faceplate swap that you can do, which I think is really cool and interesting as well. And that looks like a really interesting face sculpt on that guy. Lots of details in there, lots of paint applications, the cool boots, you know, good colour schemes. Like I say, very reminiscent of the vintage figure, although he hasn't got like yellow Y-fronts on like the vintage figure had. Pulled in this big cloak as well, again for, you know, protection against the sandstorms and what have you, which is really nice. Is that a reuse of the one that's going in with Slice and Dice? I just realised now. Should have checked that before I spoke on a hot mic, but a cool addition nonetheless. Got the claws in there. Again, something that's known and recognised of the character, you know, the fist claws and stuff. I suppose the main disappointment for me, the largest disappointment, is that we've just got these kind of reuse of the Alley Viper guns there with the submachine gun and the grappling launcher, when the Desert Scorpion had that kind of quite unique submachine gun with the magazine. It was at the top. Was it at the top or at the side? At the top. Magazine at the top with the barrel. You know, why they wouldn't have done a you know, such a unique weapon that was part of the character's kind of visual identity, I don't know. But still, nonetheless, lots to like in this set. I mean, those boots look cool, don't they, with the yellow bit at the top and stuff, and the brown, yellow and black colour scheme combo comes together. Got his cobra tattoo on the top of his shoulder there. The big-ass scorpion. I think we've seen that backpack before, haven't we? Well, whether we have or we haven't, so, you know, again, all part of it. And presumably with the all that stuff in there, this is going to be a deluxe or character with pet price. So this is going to come in at the, what's that? Is that the 45 price point? I mean, we'll obviously find out. We'll find out, but it would make sense with the other four that they're the core main wave, and this is like an additional ancillary figure release. But yeah, liking the look of this one. Really liking the look of this one. And then on to some Joes with SciFi, ladies and gents. SciFi has finally made it to the G.I. Joe Classified Series line, which I'm sure will make a large number of people out there very, very happy who's been keen to sort of see some of these more classic Joes finally make their way into the collection. Once again, like the others that they've shared, it appears to be incredibly vintage inspired. It does have some kind of 6-inch upgrades, but the broad strokes are very, very vintage figure inspired, like you know, the helmet design there. All the way down into the way the body armor is, with the stripy bits at the front, just like the vintage figure. The color scheme, well, probably a bit more muted compared to the green of the original vintage figure, but the green jumpsuit underneath with the metal side SciFi pieces over the top. I don't know, did the vintage figure or the vintage look of the character have these kind of big metal gauntlets? Possibly not. But overall, the vibe is very vintage inspired. I think is that reuse of the armored Coco boots? I think it possibly is, which means that we might be missing the boot cut articulation. That was one of the observations that folks had with the armored Coco. And so, yeah, and then got the kind of science fiction-y backpack. That's new looking, isn't it? A reinterpretation of the sort of sci-fi laser blaster there. That's a kind of new look weapon for the collection, but doesn't appear as reminiscent of the vintage stuff as the kind of, the rest of the packages. And then with this blast effect, which someone made a comment on my community post saying it looks like a giant sperm. They hope that there's time to fix the way that looks before the figure comes out. These are interesting over here. I think they're kind of mask pieces. So you got obviously the classic look sci-fi visor across the front of the helmet there, and it kind of looks like they sort of plug in the two sides, either side of the helmet, but then got a kind of full face piece as well in there, which is kind of cool. Again, a couple of little customizable features in there. I suppose the only thing that stands out to me is that the head looks a bit kind of narrow, a bit egg-shaped, to sort of presumably as for the engineering of the helmet and stuff. But otherwise, yeah, I'm kind of all on board with that. Very interesting character. Going to add some nice shelf presence to the G.I. Joe side of the collection. Little splash of something different with the kind of the metallic paint jobs. Be curious to see how the plastic on these comes out. Same as with the armored Coco, really, which I know a few folks had mentioned to me again in the comments, hoping it's not going to be that kind of swirly, metallic-y plastic that you get with Marvel Legends. That's a bit more decent than that. But yeah, overall, a nice vintage-inspired, yet with just enough kind of classified reinterpretation figure to catch the eye, and I'm pretty certain I'll be going in on this bad boy for sure. And then next on the Joe side of the shelf, we had Wetsu, another long-anticipated character for the G.I. Joe side of the shelf, and another very heavily vintage figure-inspired character here. All the way down to the little kind of sharky, fishy emblem thing there on the chest of his wetsuit, but everything about him, the color scheme, the white center with that kind of greeny blue elements around the sides, and the tall black boots, the orange of the diving gear, and even down to the diving gear itself. I'm pretty sure the vintage figure had like one of these little kind of underwater propulsion kind of things, the underwater lamp, but the color scheme and the design of all that are very heavily vintage inspired. It appears he's got like some little kind of pistol thing here, or is that like some sort of little dart gun to use under the water? I don't know. I'm not sure the vintage one had a gun, but whatever. I don't care whether he's got, whether they threw one in or not. Flippers look cool. Head sculpt looks really good, with that little hair design and stuff. Really, if that comes to life in the 6-inch plastic form, that'll be really great to see. Yeah, overall, I think fans of Wetsuit looking for that classic character, possibly kind of Sunbow cartoon fans who want to reenact some of their favourite Wetsuit-related scenes can do so. I'm going to skip this one. Not because I think it's a bad figure. In fact, I think there's a lot to like about that, but I just don't do the divers. I don't do the underwatery folks. I think I can't see how they fit in my display, how they fit in on my shelf. They just don't kind of work for me. So I'll probably skip this one just on the grounds that he's an aquatic guy. But still, I think a lot to like in there. Definitely a lot to like in there. And certainly one for the classic Joe fans. And then finally, a character I have been waiting for. This is one off my wish list. So my wish list is whittling down. I'll have to top it up soon. But one of my kind of core wish list here is Mainframe. And it looks like, again, they've gone for a vintage figure, classic look, classic comic book look, classic Sunbow cartoony vintage figure look. Mainframe there with the kind of grey uniform and stuff like the helmet design there, very classic look. This is all vintage inspired. The backpack with the aerial and the little kind of communicator laptopy case thing that he carries around with his little cable port, and then his little communications device with a little aerial there. Drawn inspiration straight from the vintage figure. I think the colour scheme's a little bit darker. They've gone for some darker greys, and they've brought it to life, obviously, a little bit more in the 6-inch form. Adding stuff like the knee pads and just a little bit more detail in and around the shirt, giving it the darker grey trimming on the lighter grey shirt. Some better kind of sculpted embellishments there. Have you noticed loads of these have got sculpted, painted belt buckles as well, which I'm always a fan of. But even then, the vintage figure had those kind of silver bits on the belt across the chest there, didn't it? So, yeah, vintage inspired, reasonably good head sculpt. I don't know if it's got a little bit of a falcony vibe about it there. It does look a little bit flat. But hey, that is what it is. But the head swap, of course, there with the baseball cap and the communications gear is cool as well. I'm always up for a head swap in there to add variety and to mix it up a bit in terms of what you can kind of put together with your figures. So relatively pleased with this one. Yeah, relatively pleased with this one. Just a solid interpretation. I had hoped, I've said it before, I'm an IDW continuity fan. That was where I kind of reignited my love of G.I. Joe from the Action Force days when I was much, much younger. And I like the mainframe characterization in there. And he was a bit more he had a beard and slightly longer hair and kind of a bit more of an interesting dress sense about him. But, classic mainframe will do me. I can get my Zorana out and... do my star-crossed lovers piece with a photo or two on Valentine's Day. Yeah, I don't know a great deal else to say. Looking good. Yeah, lots of good details in there and stuff. It looks like it will come together pretty well. And there you go. There's the digital renders that got leaked out, folks. Well, not leaked out. It was obviously a planned marketing campaign, preview campaign there. As I said earlier at the top of the video, all this stuff from the different sources had a little note on it saying, join us at #SDCC to find out more. There is a panel on the Friday, on the 25th. It's going on at 6 p.m. my time in the UK, so figure that out on your time zone. What's that? That's like 10 in the morning Pacific Coast, Pacific Standard. Where they said they'll share some behind-the-scenes looks and some digital renders and some in-hand prototypes and blah, 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 blah. But often they also do these kind of, in the big exhibition stand, they do these kind of live streams from behind the exhibition stand and stuff there. So whether there'll be some more information at that point. And of course, as we well know, at these conventions, they like to slip figures out into the display cabinets too. So whether these renders we're getting these renders kind of early on this sort of preview because they're going to be made available for pre-order SDCC or not, who knows? I'm just speculating there. It might just be the digital renders. If it is, I'll be a bit disappointed because that's just taken away all the kind of excitement of the event, hasn't it? And then the only other thing is obviously the Cold Slither. There's been some more promo pictures of Cold Slither go out, so go and hunt those out if you're interested. So there we go. So yeah, share your comments, your thoughts down below, folks. Always love hearing from you and what you're thinking around these figures. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and blah, 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 all that YouTubey stuff. Yeah, that's it. I'm running out of steam. I'm kind of waffling now. So stop waffling, Chris, and just say ta-ra, folks. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you around these parts again for another video sometime soon. Take it easy.